Welcome everyone. This is Sierra Nova here, and today I'm back with another Let's Talk Ships, and this time we're going to be talking about Kaneki and Touka from the Tokyo Ghoul series. This couple was actually requested, so I'm actually a bit excited. Anyway, since we're on the topic of Tokyo Ghoul, this is a series that definitely ended up disappointing me. I mean, the first season was phenomenal, and then everything else just seemed mediocre and a bit confusing. On a more positive note though, Touka did come out of it, and that's definitely something I can roll with. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into background. Let's start with Kaneki. So Kaneki's story is a bit of a sad one, especially if we go back to the beginning when Kaneki was an ordinary human attending Kame University studying Japanese literature. And though he didn't seem to have much of a social life, he did have a best friend named Hide at the time and was very kind. All in all, he seemed to have a pretty normal life. Now you know how they say change doesn't happen overnight? Turns out that saying isn't necessarily true, at least in the anime world. Kaneki's life changed both drastically and horribly. The worst part about it is that Kaneki didn't deserve what would befall him and the events that would follow after it, all because of a woman no less. Now if I recall correctly, Kaneki seemingly enjoyed reading and was reading one day at the cafe. I could be wrong, but I believe he had a crush on Rize but was too shy to say anything to her. Rize, being the predator that she is, approached him and one thing led to another, and he ended up walking her home. To be honest, I don't think they made it too far in before she revealed her true identity and then sunk her teeth into him literally. Rize basically turned out to be a ghoul and had all but attacked Kaneki, who never saw it coming. He never stood a chance either. He would have been done for if no one intervened, but Rize ended up getting smushed under a pile of steel beams at a nearby construction site. The next day, Kaneki awoke in the hospital where he seemed to make a full recovery. However, Kaneki would forever have a memory of that night as he not only had Rize's organs, but he was now a ghoul. Soon after, Kaneki joins Onteku as a part-time waiter and he eventually learns how to live as a ghoul. However, we all know that the story doesn't end there. In fact, just when we think things are somewhat become intolerable, he ends up getting kidnapped by Jason. And let's just say that Kaneki not only underwent a drastic personality change while he was in Jason's hands, but he also went through a lot, period. Even beyond Jason, even beyond being brainwashed and forgetting his own identity, and I think it's pretty fair to leave it at that. Alright, so let's get into Touka's background.
CCG やグールに怯える必要のない日々は全てが最悪。叫んなよ。だったら私は生まれた時から最悪ってわけ。なあ、あんた。
So unlike Kaneki, Touka has always been a ghoul, but she also had a pretty rough past. Now Touka has a younger sibling and is the daughter of Arata Kirishima and Hikari Kirishima. But contrary to Kaneki, whose mother died due to overworking when Kaneki was just 10 years old, Touka had both of her parents, but that still didn't prepare Touka for what was to come, and unlike Kaneki, Touka wasn't exactly kind, at least not initially, as she had a lot of pent-up rage. And this was most likely due to her losing her father at a young age and having to survive in the ghoul world at a fairly young age. I mean, thanks to the CCG, the Commission of Counter Ghoul, her family was torn apart. Oddly enough, her father taught her to reject the ghoul world and to live with humans in order to survive. But on the flip side, she seemed to detest humans, and we saw this when Touka first met Kaneki, especially since he was a former human. I mean, Touka certainly had it rough because as a ghoul, she was just trying to do her best to survive, but in a world like that, when you're constantly persecuted by humans for being a ghoul, that's gotta be pretty rough and confusing. Certainly don't blame her for being angry all of the time. Okay, so how exactly did they meet? So the first time they met briefly at Onteku. I think this was around the time that Touka had served Kaneki some coffee. It was also revealed that Touka knew what Rize was up to, but chose not to intervene. So while this is the perfect example of literally minding your own business, I can't say that I'm too mad at Touka here. I mean, she had no reason to intervene or help Kaneki at all, and I kinda understand that. Anyway, at this point in time, Kaneki didn't really know anything about ghouls. Now after Kaneki had survived and became known as the one-eyed ghoul, she was pretty cruel to him, literally forcing human remains down his throat whenever he refused to eat. Now at this point, Kaneki was struggling with his humanity and his ghoul side and did not want to feed on humans. I mean, that's a pretty fair struggle. After all, he was basically human the majority of his life. Of course, he'd feel some type of way about eating his own kind. And Kaneki, being Kaneki, was very kind still and tried his best to please others and Touka. But let's be honest here, Touka wasn't exactly easy to be around, especially when it seemed as if any little thing Kaneki did bothered her, to the point where she would often give him a hard time by chastising him for any and every mistake he made. I don't think I shipped them at this point because it was very clear that Touka did not like Kaneki at all, and I didn't see much hope for development between the two. But eventually there finally seemed to be a bit of growth between the two thanks to Uta. It was Uta that helped Kaneki see past Touka's tough and harsh exterior. After all, I think Kaneki found her frightening, and I would have been afraid of her too, to be honest. Especially if there seemed to be no possible way to please her. I think another moment that sparked growth between the two would have to be when we saw him tending her wounds after she attacked a pair of ghoul investigators, and when we saw Touka actually agree to train Kaneki at one point. I'd also have to add that taking care of Hinami was also something that sparked growth in how they saw each other as well. Little by little, their relationship went from difficult to respect and admiration to friendship, and we saw that continuously the more they interacted with each other. Unfortunately, their relationship came to a halt when he was kidnapped by Jason, and later on by Arima. But the worst part about Arima is that Kaneki was brainwashed and had lost all sense of himself and lost his memories. Just like after Jason, Touka and Kaneki were eventually reunited once again. Only this time they stuck by each other's side. It took some work as Kaneki pushed Touka away, especially after winning a major battle against Arima, and at the end of the day he just wanted to protect her. But Touka managed to break through his barriers, basically being direct with Kaneki, and one thing led to another. Touka became pregnant and they decided to get married after that. Touka is very devoted to Kaneki, and it's very clear that they care for each other a lot. So as always, I'm a sucker for development, and the ship definitely has a lot of it. They went through a lot individually and together, and I personally think this is a good ship, mostly for that reason. Especially if you look at how they were when they first met, up until now. I'm really glad that they can both find happiness because they really deserve it, especially Kaneki. Just when it felt like things were going to get better for him, he was constantly going through yet another ordeal, and I mean he got kidnapped like twice, and I'd say Kaneki really went through a true identity crisis. Somehow he was able to get himself back on track, and I'd like to think that Touka had a part in it. Anyway, I'm curious what everyone else thinks about Kaneki and Touka. Do you like them together? Do you feel like they were developed or lacking in any areas? Be sure to let me know down below in the comments. Thank you for tuning in. Sierra Nova is out.